My daughter went to the restroom on the cruise, and the waiter whispered to me, "Don't drink that." 12 hours later, my will changed. I never thought the words of a stranger would save my life and open my eyes to a betrayal that had been brewing for years. Today, I am going to tell you something I never thought I would tell. And if you, for a second, feel that this seems familiar, I only ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It is going to help me continue to vent. The Caribbean air felt heavy that July afternoon when I first boarded the salty Serenity. My trembling hands clung to the metal railing as my orthopedic shoes squeaked against the polished floor of the ship. It was a sound that embarrassed me, but at my age of 73 years, comfort had won the battle against vanity a long time ago. Paula, my daughter, walked 5 feet ahead of me, her perfectly styled hair fluttering in the sea breeze. She wore a white linen dress that cost more than my monthly pension, and her designer sandals made an elegant sound against the cruise deck. Every now and then, she turned to me with that smile I knew so well, tense, forced, like when she was a little girl and had to pretend gratitude for a gift she did not like. "Mom, hurry up a little. People are staring at us," she muttered, without barely moving her lips, that ability she had perfected to scold me without others hearing her. Her eyes, which once shone with genuine love when she was small, now scanned me from top to bottom with a mixture of impatience and embarrassment that pierced me like a silent knife. Behind us, Grant, my 23-year-old grandson, had his eyes glued to his cell phone, recording stories for his social media. Occasionally, he looked up to capture some angle of the ship, always making sure I did not appear in the frame. He wore a designer shirt that I had given him on his last birthday, when I still believed that gestures of love could buy genuine affection. "Grandma, can you walk faster? I want to upload content from the deck before the sun sets," he said, without taking his eyes off the screen. His voice had that coldness he had developed in recent years, when he began to see my physical limitations as personal inconveniences instead of the inevitable realities of aging. This trip had been Paula's idea, or at least that is what she had told me 3 weeks ago when she showed up at my small apartment in Phoenix, with the tickets already purchased and a too-wide smile adorning her face. "It's a gift, Mom, to thank you for everything you have done for us," she had declared as she placed the documents on my kitchen table, the same one where I had helped Grant with his math homework throughout his childhood. It should have been a moment of pure happiness, after years of begging for family time, of inventing excuses to call them, of pretending that it did not hurt when they canceled our Sunday dinners for more important commitments. Finally, I had a complete week with them, a whole week where they could not escape, where we would be together 24 hours a day, where maybe I could recover even a fraction of the love I felt I had gradually lost. But from the moment we set foot in the Miami port, something felt strange. Paula constantly checked her watch, as if she were timing something I could not understand. Grant maintained whispered conversations on the phone, always moving away when I approached, and both treated me with an exaggerated courtesy that was more hurtful than the indifference I had become accustomed to. My cabin was on deck 6, while theirs was on 8, in the premium suite area that cost 3 times more than my basic room. "It's better this way, Mom. You need to rest, and we want to enjoy the ship's nightlife," Paula had explained when she handed me my access card. The separation hurt more than I wanted to admit, but I swallowed the disappointment as I had learned to do so many times before. That first night, we had dinner at the main buffet, surrounded by the hustle and bustle of happy families who laughed and told anecdotes about their days. I tried to strike up a conversation, asking about Paula's job at her digital marketing company, about the business administration studies that Grant had abandoned the previous year to find himself with the money I had been sending him monthly. "Business is going well, Mom. Very well," Paula replied curtly, without elaborating on details. "In fact, we are considering expanding to the international market. There is a lot of money in digital commerce, especially if you know how to handle the correct investments." Grant nodded while fiddling with his phone, occasionally showing me photos of influencers who earned millions promoting products on Instagram. "The real fortune is in social media, Grandma, in creating content that generates passive dividends. Traditional jobs are a thing of the past." His words sounded hollow to me, as if they were reciting a script they had rehearsed previously. When I tried to ask specifics about their projects, about their plans, about anything that would allow me to feel that I was still part of their lives, both diverted the conversation to superficial topics or simply changed the subject. The second day was worse. During breakfast, Paula criticized me for the clothes I had chosen. "Mom, that dress looks very old. Didn't you bring something more modern?" At the pool, Grant complained that my slow movements ruined his shots for TikTok. At dinner, both whispered comments about other passengers while I ate in silence, feeling increasingly like a stranger in what was supposed to be a family reunion. It was that second night when I started to notice something strange in their behavior. Paula constantly insisted on preparing me drinks. "Let me pour the wine for you, Mom. You rest." Grant offered to bring me pills for seasickness. "Grandma, you look a little pale. Shouldn't you take something for your stomach?" Their gestures of care, which in normal circumstances would have filled my heart with joy, felt mechanical, forced, as if they were fulfilling an obligation rather than expressing genuine love. There was something in their eyes when they watched me drink or take medication, an intensity that made me nervous without understanding exactly why. The third night, as the ship sailed toward the coasts of the Bahamas, Paula announced that they would have dinner at the cruise's most elegant restaurant. "It's a special celebration, Mom. I want it to be a night you never forget," she said, as she applied a crimson-red lipstick in front of my cabin mirror. She had dressed in an elegant black dress that enhanced her figure, the type of attire she reserved for truly important occasions. Grant had also dressed up more than usual, wearing an impeccable white shirt and a watch that I recognized as one I had seen in luxury store windows in downtown Phoenix. The Grand Terrace restaurant was decorated with crystal chandeliers and white linen tablecloths. The windows offered a panoramic view of the Caribbean Sea under the moonlight, creating a romantic atmosphere that contrasted strangely with the tension I felt growing in my chest. Other diners whispered intimately at their tables, couples celebrating anniversaries, families toasting special reunions. Paula ordered the most expensive bottle of wine on the menu, a Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon that cost more than I spent on food for an entire month. "Today, we are going to toast to you, Mom, for everything you have meant in our lives," she declared with a smile that did not reach her eyes. As the sommelier poured the wine into fine crystal glasses, I could not help but remember all the times I had dreamed of a moment like this, all the nights I had stayed awake imagining deep conversations with my daughter, genuine laughter with my grandson, the feeling of being valued and loved by the two most important people in my world. But this reality felt like a badly rehearsed play, where everyone knew their lines except me. As the waiter filled my glass with that Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon that shone like blood under the restaurant lights, my mind began to wander to memories I had tried to bury for years. Paula raised her glass with a smile that seemed rehearsed, but I could not stop thinking about another dinner, 20 years ago, when she still called me Mommy, and her eyes lit up when she saw me arrive from work. "To you, Mom," she said, but her words sounded hollow, like lost echoes in an empty cave. Grant raised his glass too, but his eyes were fixed on his phone. As always, it was as if he were physically present, but absent in everything else. A shell of the boy who used to run to me yelling, "Grandma," every time I showed up at his door. I vividly remembered that day in October of 2003, when Paula showed up at my apartment with Grant in her arms, crying inconsolably. "Mom, Richard left me. I do not know what I am going to do," she had said between sobs, her makeup smeared, forming black lines down her cheeks. Grant's father had decided that the responsibility of being a dad was not for him, and had left for Miami with a woman 10 years younger, leaving behind a trail of broken promises and unpaid bills. For the next 8 years, my small 2-bedroom apartment became a refuge for both of them. I worked double shifts at the textile factory, arriving home with numb fingers and an aching back, only to find Grant waiting for me with his arms outstretched and a smile that could erase any fatigue. I made him dinner, helped him with homework, read him stories until he fell asleep, nestled against my chest. Paula, meanwhile, focused on rebuilding her professional life. She studied marketing at night while I took care of Grant, promising, "Someday I will pay you back for all this, Mom." But those years, despite the tiredness and economic difficulties, were the happiest of my life. Every morning I woke up with purpose, knowing that two people depended on me, that my love and sacrifice had a tangible meaning. I sold the gold jewelry I had inherited from my mother to pay for Paula's university tuition. I liquidated my savings for the down payment on the larger apartment when Grant started to need his own space. I worked weekends and holidays to pay for his school supplies, his clothes, his medicines when he got sick. Every dollar I invested in them seemed like the best investment of my life, an emotional capital that I was sure would return to me, multiplied in love and gratitude. "Do you remember, Paula, when you lived with me?" I asked suddenly, interrupting the artificial silence that had settled at our table. Grant had nightmares and came to my bed every night. He said the monsters did not dare to come near when he was with me. Paula forced a smile and drank a long sip of wine before answering. "Yes, Mom, those were other times." Her tone was distant, as if she were talking about someone else's life, not those years where every day we had been an inseparable team. Grant did not even look up from his phone. His fingers moved quickly across the screen, probably answering messages or checking his social media. For him, apparently, those memories did not deserve a second of his attention. The move had come when Grant turned 11 years old. Paula had gotten a well-paid job at a digital advertising company with a salary that allowed her to rent an elegant apartment in downtown Phoenix. "It is time for us to have our own space, Mom," she had told me while packing her belongings. "But we will visit you all the time. We will be neighbors." At first, they kept that promise. They came on Sundays for lunch. Grant told me about school. Paula showed me photos of her work projects. I prepared turkey and mashed potatoes, his favorite meal since he was a child, and filled the table with his preferred desserts. Those Sundays were my reason for living, the light I waited for all week. But gradually, the visits spaced out. "I have an important meeting on Sunday, Mom. I will make it up to you next week." "Grant has soccer. We cannot go." "Work got complicated. We better talk on the phone." The excuses multiplied like a disease, each one more elaborate than the last, until Sundays became days of absolute loneliness. I made up for their absence by calling them daily. "How are you, my love?" I asked Paula, but her answers became increasingly curt. "Fine, Mom. Busy. Click." The conversations that used to last hours were reduced to exchanges of basic information, as if it were an obligation that had to be completed quickly to move on to more important things. With Grant, it was even worse. During his adolescence, he developed a special ability to make me feel like an intruder in his life. When I called him, he sighed audibly before answering, as if my voice was an annoyance interrupting more relevant matters. "Hello, Grandma," he would say with a tone that clearly conveyed that he preferred to be doing anything else. "Do you need money for anything, my dear?" I always asked him, and that was the only part of our conversations where his voice came to life. "Well, now that you mention it, there is a programming course that would help me a lot." "The private university has better contacts, Grandma. My friends are going to travel to London, and it would be good for my English." For years, I transferred a large part of my monthly pension to his bank account. I fed myself on rice and lentils to be able to send him the money that he spent on whims that he considered essential for his future. Every sacrifice seemed like an investment in his happiness, a way to keep alive the bond that I felt was fading month after month. When he turned 18 years old, Paula had explained to me that Grant needed to become financially independent to develop his character. But paradoxically, the requests for money increased. "It is for his personal growth, Mom," Paula told me. "He is exploring different business opportunities. Entrepreneurship requires initial capital." I never saw concrete evidence of those supposed ventures. When I asked for details, Grant vaguely talked about digital projects and cryptocurrency investments, which were always about to generate great dividends. His explanations were full of financial terms that I did not fully understand, but which sounded sophisticated enough to convince me that he had a solid plan for his future. The truth was that I wanted to believe. I wanted to believe that my money was helping to build something valuable, that my sacrifices made sense, that someday Grant would be successful and prosperous. And then he would remember with gratitude the grandmother who had believed in him when no one else did. "Mom, are you okay? You look very thoughtful," Paula said, interrupting my memories. Her voice had a note of impatience, as if my silence was a lack of courtesy toward her efforts to create a special dinner. I was just remembering when you were little, I replied, trying to maintain a light tone. You were so affectionate with me. Grant finally looked up from his phone, but only to look at me with an expression that I interpreted as pity mixed with annoyance. Grandma, that was a long time ago. People change, grow. His words hit me like a silent punch. It was as if he had reduced all those years of love and care to a childish phase he was ashamed of, as if my affection had been something he had overcome upon becoming an adult. The waiter approached to ask if we wanted to order dinner, but I had completely lost my appetite. The glass of wine remained untouched in front of me, its dark content reflecting the restaurant lights like a liquid mirror that showed a reality I preferred not to see. Order for me, I told Paula, whatever you think I will like. She ordered without consulting me, choosing expensive dishes that I probably would not be able to finish. Everything about that dinner seemed designed to impress external observers, not to generate a genuine moment between family. It was an elaborate show where I was both the audience and the involuntary protagonist of a play I did not fully understand. While we waited for the food, I noticed that Paula constantly checked her wristwatch, a Rolex that I did not remember having seen before. It was the type of accessory that cost more than my total net worth, an ostentation of wealth that contrasted strangely with the constant complaints about economic difficulties I had heard from her for years. During the main courses, I began to notice behaviors that worried me in ways I did not know how to express. Paula insisted on serving every drop of wine that entered my glass, taking the bottle from my hands with a tense smile every time I tried to pour myself. "Let me do it, Mom. You are trembling a little. We do not want anything to spill on your dress." I was not trembling. My hands were perfectly steady, as they always had been, but she repeated that gesture over and over again, as if she had rehearsed the movement. Grant, for his part, had developed a sudden concern for my well-being, which was strange coming from someone who had spent the last 5 years treating me as if I were invisible. "Grandma, you look a little pale. Are you sure you do not want to take something for seasickness?" he asked, as he took a small bottle of pills that I did not recognize from his pocket. "I bought them at the ship's pharmacy. They are very effective for discomfort." It was the third time in 2 days that he offered me medications that I had not requested. Pills for seasickness, for headache, for better sleep. Every time I politely declined his offers, both he and Paula exchanged quick glances that they thought I did not notice. Glances loaded with meaning that made me feel as if I were being excluded from a conversation that was happening without words. "I do not need anything, thank you," I replied, but my refusal seemed to bother them more than was reasonable. Grant put the pills away with a brusque gesture, and Paula drank her wine in one gulp, as if she were frustrated by something she could not control. The food arrived on enormous white porcelain plates, adorned with herbs I did not recognize. Paula had ordered lamb for me, even though she knew perfectly well that I had developed digestive problems with red meats after 60. It was a small detail, but revealing of how disconnected she was from my current reality. Or perhaps, I thought with a pang of sadness, she simply did not care enough to remember. "You know what, Mom?" Paula said as she cut her salmon with precise movements. "I have been thinking about your financial situation." Her words took me by surprise. For years, we had carefully avoided that topic. I lived off my modest pension, occasionally supplemented by some sewing work I did for neighbors in the neighborhood. It was not a fortune, but it allowed me to live with dignity and still send money to Grant when he needed it. "My financial situation?" I repeated, without understanding where the conversation was going. "Well, let's be realistic," she continued, avoiding my gaze as she spoke. "You are not getting any younger, and medical expenses, special care, all that costs a lot of money these days. I have been researching some investment options that could help you maximize your savings." Grant immediately joined the conversation, putting his phone aside for the first time all night. "Exactly, Grandma. The Bitcoin market is experiencing incredible growth. If you invest now, in a few years you could have double or triple the capital. It is the new way to generate wealth." He spoke with the enthusiasm of someone who had memorized sales pitches, using terms like digital assets and portfolio diversification, which sounded impressive but empty coming from him. During the last 3 years, his only job had been to manage the money transfers I sent him monthly. He had no experience in real finance, but he spoke as if he were an expert in international markets. "I do not understand any of those things," I admitted honestly. "My money is in the bank, where it has always been." "It is safe there, but it does not generate returns, Mom," Paula insisted, her voice taking on a tone of urgency that made me nervous. "Inflation is devouring your savings every day they sit in a basic checking account. You need more sophisticated financial instruments." "Look, Grandma," Grant said, taking out his phone and showing me colorful charts that meant nothing to me. "This guy earned $2 million by investing only $50,000 in cryptocurrency. Imagine what you could achieve with all your assets." The word assets sounded strange applied to my modest savings. It was as if they were talking about figures that did not correspond to my reality. I was not a rich woman. I did not have millions hidden in secret accounts. I only had the dollars I had saved penny by penny over decades of work, plus the value of my small apartment that I had finished paying off 5 years ago. "How much money are we talking about exactly?" I asked, genuinely confused by the direction the conversation had taken. Paula and Grant exchanged another of those glances, loaded with meaning. This time it was Paula who answered, choosing her words carefully. "Well, between your savings, capitalized pension, the value of the apartment, we are surely talking about a considerable sum, enough to generate dividends that allow you to live better than you live now." It was true that my apartment had increased in value over the years. The neighborhood had gentrified, and properties similar to mine were selling for prices that surprised me when I saw them advertised in local newspapers. But I had never considered selling. It was my home, the place where I had raised Paula, where I kept all my memories, where I felt safe and protected. "I do not want to sell my house," I said firmly, feeling a sudden need to establish clear boundaries. "No one is talking about selling anything," Grant replied quickly, with a smile that was intended to be reassuring, but that did not reach his eyes. "We are just saying that there are smarter ways to manage your resources, ways that would give you more freedom, more options." During the rest of the dinner, they continued to bombard me with information about investment opportunities, emerging markets, and financial strategies that were supposedly revolutionizing the way people planned their economic future. They spoke with such speed and confidence that I felt lost, as if I were attending a conference delivered in a language I only partially understood. What disturbed me most was not the information itself, but the intensity with which they presented it. It was as if they had been waiting for this moment, as if the entire dinner had been a preparation for this specific conversation. Their arguments sounded rehearsed, and the way they complimented each other when speaking suggested that they had discussed this topic among themselves before including me. "Why are you suddenly so interested in my finances?" I finally asked, interrupting a monologue by Grant about gold market fluctuations. The question caught them off guard. Paula coughed slightly and drank water before responding. "It is not sudden, Mom. We have always cared about your well-being. It is just that now we have more knowledge about these things, more connections in the financial world. And we want to make sure you are protected," Grant added, his voice adopting a protective tone that contrasted strangely with years of indifference towards my real well-being. "That you have enough resources for any emergency that may arise." Their words sounded reasonable on the surface, but something in their delivery generated a deep uneasiness in me. For years, it had been me who worried about their financial emergencies, who sent them money when they needed it, who sacrificed my own needs to ensure they were comfortable. This sudden concern for my economic security felt like a change of roles that I did not fully understand. Dessert arrived without me having noticed, an elaborate tiramisu that probably cost more than my meals for a complete week. Paula served me a glass of a golden liqueur that she said was special for digestion, but that tasted bitter and burned my throat in an unpleasant way. "Try this, Mom. It is going to help you with the heavy meal," she insisted when I made a face at the first sip. "It is imported from Italy, very expensive, the kind of luxury you could afford regularly if you optimized your investments." Boom. As I sipped that liqueur that I did not like, I noticed that both were watching me intently, as if they were waiting for some kind of specific reaction. Their looks were intense, almost scientific, as if I were an experiment they were carefully monitoring. "I feel a little dizzy," I admitted after finishing the glass. "I think I have drunk more than usual." "Do you want us to walk you to your cabin?" Paula immediately asked, getting up from her chair with a speed that surprised me. "You should not be alone if you do not feel well." "No, I am fine," I replied, although the truth was that I felt strangely disoriented. "I just need some fresh air." I left the restaurant walking slowly, concentrating on maintaining my balance while my thoughts became increasingly confused. In the elevator to my cabin, I leaned against the cold metal wall and tried to understand what had been so disturbing about that dinner. I could not point to anything specific, but the whole experience had felt like a performance, as if I had been the audience of a show I had not asked to see. That night, as I prepared for sleep, I found an envelope on the nightstand that I did not remember putting there. Inside, there were colorful brochures about investment plans and a handwritten note from Paula. "Mom, think about it. We only want the best for you. With love, Paula and Grant." I sat on the edge of the bed, reading those brochures full of promises about guaranteed earnings and brilliant financial futures. The words blurred before my tired eyes, but a persistent feeling of alarm began to crystallize in my chest. Something was terribly wrong, but I still could not identify exactly what it was. The fourth night of the cruise dawned with a starry sky that was reflected in the calm waters of the Caribbean. From my cabin window I could see the lights of the Bahamian coast blinking in the distance like diamonds scattered on black velvet. I had slept poorly, waking up several times with a feeling of restlessness that I could not shake. The investment brochures were still on my nightstand, their promises of instant wealth mocking my confusion. Paula had insisted that we dine again at the Grand Terrace, the same elegant restaurant as the previous night. "It is our last chance, Mom. Tomorrow we arrive at port, and all this luxury will end," she had said with a smile that seemed too bright, too forced. She had dressed even more elegantly than before, in a black silk dress that I recognized from the windows of the most expensive boutiques in downtown Phoenix. Her jewelry was also new, diamond earrings that caught the light every time she moved her head. A gold bracelet that I did not remember ever seeing on her. Grant had also dressed up with unusual care. He wore a suit that seemed tailor-made, and his shoes were made of genuine Italian leather, the type of footwear that cost more than many people's monthly salary. For a young man who was supposedly finding himself without stable income, his wardrobe had noticeably improved in recent months. "Where did you get all those expensive clothes?" I asked as we walked toward the restaurant, my genuine curiosity mixing with a growing concern. "The investments have been giving good results," Paula vaguely replied, adjusting the bracelet with a nervous gesture. "I told you we understood the financial market. Our portfolio has generated excellent dividends this year." Grant nodded with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Exactly, Grandma. That is why we want to help you too. Imagine having access to this type of wealth. You could buy whatever you wanted, travel wherever you thought of, live like a queen." His words sounded rehearsed to me, as if they had practiced this conversation before having it with me. There was something artificial about their enthusiasm, a theatrical quality that made me increasingly nervous. The restaurant was full of elegant couples and families celebrating special occasions. The atmosphere was romantic, with candles flickering on each table and soft music creating an intimate atmosphere. But I felt like an actress forced to participate in a play whose script I completely ignored. They sat us at the same table as the previous night, next to the panoramic windows that offered spectacular views of the night sea. Paula immediately ordered a bottle of French champagne, the kind of expensive celebration she reserved for truly special moments. "Today we are going to toast to important decisions," she announced, as the sommelier uncorked the bottle with ceremonial elegance. "What decisions?" I asked, feeling like I was being led towards something I did not understand. "The ones we are going to make about your future, Mom," she replied, with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "We have been thinking, and we believe it is time for you to take concrete steps to ensure your economic well-being." Grant took out his phone and began showing me investment apps, cryptocurrency growth charts, testimonials from people who had supposedly multiplied their capital in a matter of months. Look, Grandma, this man invested $100,000 in Bitcoin and now has more than $1 million. This is the future of money. As he spoke, I noticed a young waiter approaching our table with a tray of glasses. He was a boy about 25 years old, dark hair and kind eyes, who wore the impeccable uniform of the restaurant staff. He moved with the professional grace of someone accustomed to serving demanding passengers. "Good evening," he said with a Tampa accent, as he began to fill our glasses with golden champagne that bubbled cheerfully. "I hope you enjoy your special evening." Paula smiled at him with that automatic courtesy she reserved for service personnel. "Thank you. We are celebrating." The waiter nodded as he served my glass, but I noticed that he looked at me with a strange expression, as if he wanted to tell me something but did not dare. His movements were careful, almost ceremonial, as he filled the champagne to the exact edge dictated by the elegant service protocol. "I am going to the ladies' room for a moment," Paula suddenly announced, rising from the table quickly. "I will be right back." Grant immediately immersed himself in his phone, starting to record a video for his social media. "Having dinner in first class," he murmured toward the camera, "living the life that those who know how to invest intelligently deserve." I was left alone for a moment, watching the bubbles rise elegantly through my champagne glass. The golden liquid caught the candlelight, creating small rainbows that danced on the surface. It was beautiful, but something about the situation generated a deep uneasiness in me that I could not explain. It was then that the waiter approached our table again, apparently to adjust the cutlery and check that everything was in order. But when he leaned over to straighten my napkin, he whispered something to me that would change my life forever. "Ma'am," he said in a voice so low that I could barely hear him, his lips barely moving as he pretended to wipe something off the table. "Do not drink that, please. I do not know you, but do not drink it." His words hit me like lightning. My heart began to beat so hard that I was sure everyone in the restaurant could hear it. "Pardon?" I whispered back, thinking I had misunderstood. The young man looked me directly in the eyes for a fraction of a second, and in that look I saw something that chilled my blood, compassion mixed with desperate urgency. "I cannot say more," he murmured, as he walked away from the table as if nothing had happened. "But listen to me. Throw it away now." He walked away with the same professional naturalness with which he had arrived, leaving me sitting in my chair with the glass of champagne in my trembling hands and 1,000 questions exploding in my mind like fireworks. Why had he told me that? How did he know something was wrong? What had he seen or heard that I had not noticed? I looked at the glass with new eyes. The champagne bubbled innocently, its golden color as beautiful as before, but now every bubble seemed like a small warning. I remembered all the times during the trip that Paula had insisted on serving me drinks personally, all the pills that Grant had offered me, all the complicit glances they had exchanged when they thought I was not paying attention. My mind began to process memories with terrible clarity. The night before, when I had felt dizzy after the digestive liqueur, the way both had watched me so intently as I drank, the constant questions about my well-being, as if they were monitoring my physical condition, the conversations about my finances, about the need to make important decisions about my future, an image began to form in my mind. An image so horrible that initially my brain refused to accept it. But the more I thought about the events of the last few days, the more sense this terrible explanation for their strange behavior made. Grant continued recording videos, completely absorbed in his phone. Every now and then he looked at me and smiled, but his eyes had that coldness he had developed in recent years, as if I were one more object than a person. "Grandma, are you not going to drink? The champagne is going to spoil." "In a moment," I replied, trying to keep my voice stable while my world silently crumbled around me. "I am savoring the moment." But the truth was that I was desperately trying to decide what to do with the information I had just received. Should I confront them directly? Should I pretend I had not heard anything? Should I seek help immediately? Paula returned from the restroom with a radiant smile, as if she had used those minutes of privacy to mentally prepare for something important. She sat down with a sigh of satisfaction and raised her glass in the air. "To the future?" she said, looking me directly in the eyes. "To the brave decisions that lead us toward prosperity." Grant raised his glass too, his eyes shining with an emotion I could not interpret. "To family?" he added, "and to taking care of the people we love." Both looked at me expectantly, waiting for me to raise my glass and join their toast. The champagne continued to bubble in my glass, each bubble now a small reminder of the waiter's warning. My hands trembled slightly as I pretended to consider their words. "You know what?" I finally said, my voice surprisingly firm, considering the emotional earthquake I was experiencing internally. "I prefer to wait until the food arrives. Champagne on an empty stomach makes me dizzy." Paula's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, so briefly that someone who did not know her intimately would not have noticed. But I had been her mother for 43 years, and I recognized that micro-expression of frustration I had seen thousands of times when things did not go exactly as she had planned. "Of course, Mom," she said, immediately recovering her composure. "Whatever you want." But her eyes followed me with a new intensity as I pretended to study the menu, and for the first time in days, I realized that maybe I had been in much greater danger than I had ever imagined. That night, I could not sleep. I lay awake in my narrow bed, listening to the soft purr of the ship's engines as we sailed toward our next destination. Every sound in the hallway put me on alert. Footsteps approaching my door, the ding of the elevator, voices whispering in languages I did not recognize. The glass of champagne that I had pretended to accidentally spill on my napkin kept obsessing me. What did it contain? What would they have done to me if I had drunk it? At the hour of 5 minutes, when I was sure that Paula and Grant were sleeping in their luxurious suites on the upper deck, I silently got dressed and left my cabin. The ship had a medical center that operated 24 hours a day, designed to attend to emergencies of the thousands of passengers on board. I had seen the sign during our daily tours, but I never thought I would need it for something so sinister. The hallway was deserted, barely lit by emergency lights that created long, strange shadows on the wood-paneled walls. My shoes made small noises against the thick carpet, sounds that seemed deafening in the silence of the early morning. Each step brought me closer to a truth that a part of me still hoped was not real. The medical center was located on Deck 3, behind glass doors that allowed me to see the illuminated interior. An older man with gray hair and glasses looked up when I entered. His expression immediately changed from routine to worried when he saw my face. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked in English, with an accent that sounded German or Austrian. "Do you have a medical emergency?" I need you to analyze something," I said, my voice sounding weaker than I intended. I took a paper napkin from my purse where I had saved a few drops of last night's champagne. "I think someone put something in my drink." The doctor leaned forward, his expression immediately becoming serious. During his years on cruise ships, he had probably seen all kinds of situations, from food poisoning to more serious cases of deliberate poisoning. "Is it a relative who served you the drink?" he asked as he took the napkin with latex gloves and placed it in a sterile container. "My daughter," I whispered, and those 2 words cost me more effort than any confession I had ever made in my life. "And my grandson." I saw something change in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or sadness, as if he had seen similar cases before, as if the abuse of older people by family members was more common than I had imagined in my worst nightmares. "I am going to send this to the ship's laboratory immediately," he said in a gentle but professional voice. "The results will be ready in approximately 6 hours. Meanwhile, do you feel safe? Do you need us to contact security?" I shook my head quickly. "Not yet. I need to be sure before making any accusation." "I understand," he replied, but he gave me a card with his direct number. "If you feel any strange symptoms, any dizziness or nausea, call me immediately. And ma'am, stay close to public places until we have the results." I returned to my cabin with my heart beating so hard that my chest hurt. 6 hours. 6 hours to confirm if my own relatives were trying to poison me. 6 hours to decide what to do if my worst suspicions were confirmed. During breakfast, Paula and Grant acted with apparent normalcy, but I now noticed details that I had previously overlooked. The way Paula constantly checked her phone, sending messages to someone whose identity she kept secret. The way Grant watched me when he thought I was not looking, studying my face as if looking for signs of something specific. "Did you sleep well, Mom?" Paula asked as she spread jam on her toast. "You look a little pale." "Perfectly," I lied, forcing a smile. "Although I woke up early. The excitement of the trip, I suppose." Grant looked up from his phone with sudden interest. "How early? You were not walking around the ship alone, were you? It can be dangerous for someone your age." The question chilled my blood. How did he know I had left my cabin? Had they been watching me? Had they installed some type of monitoring in my room? "I just went to the lobby bathroom," I replied carefully. "I needed to stretch my legs." But I saw something in their eyes that confirmed to me that they knew more than they admitted. A silent understanding passed between Paula and Grant, one of those wordless communications that completely excluded me. That morning, while we visited a port on the Bahamian coast, I pretended to be fascinated by the souvenir shops, while in reality I looked for opportunities to get away from them without arousing suspicion. In a small pharmacy, I bought a bottle of vitamins that I did not need, but that gave me an excuse to ask about poisoning symptoms. "Are you looking for something specific, ma'am?" the pharmacist asked in broken English. "Just information," I replied in a low voice. If someone put something in the food or drink of an older person, what symptoms would they have? The woman looked at me with immediate concern. "Are you feeling sick? Do you need help?" "It is hypothetical," I insisted, although my voice trembled. "Just curiosity." She explained to me about common sedatives, barbiturates, substances that could be used to make someone lose consciousness gradually without it being immediately obvious, drugs that were colorless, tasteless, and that would dissolve completely in alcohol or sweet drinks. "These substances are very dangerous for older people," she warned me. "The heart, blood pressure, they can be fatal if used incorrectly." Fatal. The word resonated in my mind as I walked through the cobblestone streets of the port, pretending to admire the medieval architecture while Paula and Grant took selfies in front of every monument. Were they trying to kill me? Or just incapacitate me enough to be able to manipulate my financial decisions? I remembered the conversations about my investments, about the need to optimize my resources. Had they planned to drug me until I signed documents that would give them control over my assets? Or had they gone further in their plans? "Mom, are you okay?" Paula asked, noticing that I had stopped motionless in front of a jewelry display case. "You look very thoughtful." "I was just admiring that necklace," I replied, pointing to a pearl necklace that cost more than I spent in 6 months. "It is beautiful." "You could buy it," Grant said with sudden enthusiasm. "After we optimize your investments, this type of luxury will be completely normal for you." The ease with which he talked about spending my money deeply disturbed me. He no longer spoke of future possibilities, but of concrete plans, as if my assets were something he already considered partially his. At noon, my phone vibrated with a message from the ship's doctor. "Results ready. Please report to the medical center as soon as possible." I invented an excuse about needing seasickness pills and headed to the medical center with trembling legs. The doctor received me with an expression that confirmed my worst fears before he said a single word. "Ma'am, I regret to confirm your suspicions," he said, showing me a paper with laboratory results that I did not fully understand. The sample contained a significant amount of diazepam and zolpidem. They are powerful sedatives, especially dangerous when combined with alcohol. I felt as if I had been punched in the stomach. It was real. It was completely, terribly real. "What quantity?" I asked, although I was not sure I wanted to know the answer. "Enough to cause loss of consciousness in someone of your weight and age," he replied gravely. "If you had drunk that entire glass, you would have been unconscious for hours. And considering your age and possible pre-existing heart conditions, it could have been fatal." Fatal, that terrible word again. My own daughter and my grandson had literally been trying to kill me. "What do you recommend I do?" I asked, my voice sounding strangely calm, considering that my world had just exploded into 1,000 pieces. "First, safety," he said firmly. "Do not accept food or drink from them under any circumstances. Second, documentation. I am going to prepare an official report of these findings. And third, do you have someone on land who can help you? A lawyer, trusted family, authorities? I shook my head slowly. For years, Paula and Grant had been my only significant relatives. My friendships had gradually deteriorated as I became more emotionally dependent on them. I did not have an independent support circle, which had probably been part of their plan. "Then we are going to create one," he said with determination. "The ship's captain has authority to detain passengers if there is evidence of a crime. We can also contact the port authorities when we arrive in the United States." As I returned to meet Paula and Grant, carrying physical evidence of their betrayal, I realized that I had a fundamental decision to make. I could confront them directly, risking that they would deny everything and possibly escalate their attempts to harm me. Or I could play their own game, feign ignorance while documenting more evidence and planning my counterattack. For the first time in years, I felt something akin to strength within me. These people had gravely underestimated the woman they had been trying to destroy, and they were about to discover exactly how wrong they had been. With the lab results stored in my purse like a silent bomb, I returned to the group feigning the same weak smile I had been using throughout the trip. But something fundamental had changed in me. I was no longer the naive grandmother who had boarded the ship 5 days ago. I was a woman who had discovered that her loved ones wanted to see her dead, and who had decided that she was not going to allow that to happen. "Did you find anything for seasickness?" Paula asked when I approached where they were waiting for me next to an ornamental fountain in the Italian port plaza. "The doctor gave me some pills," I replied, showing her a bottle of harmless vitamins I had bought at the pharmacy. "He said they would make me feel better." I saw the immediate interest in her eyes, the way she exchanged a quick glance with Grant. They were calculating something, probably wondering if these new pills would interfere with their poisoning plans. "What kind of pills?" Grant asked with curiosity that tried to sound casual, but that sounded too intense to be genuine. "Something natural," I lied easily. "For balance. The doctor said many older people need them on cruises." During the rest of the afternoon, while we visited a medieval cathedral and I pretended to be fascinated by 14th century frescoes, I developed my plan. I had learned something important during my conversation with the doctor. I needed additional evidence. A single analyzed glass could be dismissed as a lab error or accidental contamination, but multiple documented and photographed poisoning attempts would be impossible to deny. That afternoon, when we returned to the ship, Paula announced that they had made reservations to dine at the cruise's most exclusive Japanese restaurant. "One last special celebration before our trip ends," she said. But I could now see the falsehood in every gesture, hear the lie in every word. In my cabin, as I prepared for what I knew would be another night of poisoning attempts, I took out my phone and began to document everything. I photographed the lab results. I recorded a video explaining my suspicions. I wrote a detailed email addressed to my lawyer in Phoenix, which I scheduled to be sent automatically if I did not confirm my well-being before a certain hour. I also discreetly called the bank where I kept my savings. "I need to put a fraud alert on my account," I told the representative, "and I want any transaction greater than $100 to require direct phone confirmation with me." "Has something specific happened, Ms. Morales?" the employee asked. "Prevention," I replied. "I have reason to believe that someone might try to access my funds without authorization." The employee assured me that the security measures would be immediately active. I also took the opportunity to ask him about the process for changing beneficiaries on my accounts, information that I carefully saved for future use. The Japanese restaurant was elegant and minimalist, with low tables and cushions where diners sat on the floor. The decor was authentic, with rice paper screens and a chef preparing fresh sushi behind a polished wooden bar. Paula had specifically chosen a private table, separated from the main area by decorative screens. "Privacy for important conversations," she explained as we settled onto the cushions. "We need to talk about serious issues without distractions." Grant sat across from me, his phone, as always, in his hands, but I noticed that this time he was not playing or checking social media. He was discreetly recording, capturing video of our table and our conversation. Why would they need a visual record of this dinner? We coordinated a plan. That night, During the farewell dinner in the main room of the ship, there would be security cameras discreetly positioned at our table. Security personnel dressed as civilians would be seated at nearby tables, and the ship's doctor would be present, ready to immediately analyze any suspicious substance. When I met Paula and Grant for breakfast, they acted with an urgency they had never shown before. Their smiles were more tense, their movements more nervous. Time was running out, and they knew it. As I pretended to review the documents, I saw Paula prepare what would be her final attempt. This time, she did not bother to be subtle. She opened a small jar from her bag and poured its contents directly into my glass of wine, as if it no longer mattered whether I saw it or not. The glass of wine that I held now contained a full-bodied Zinfandel that I had chosen myself, without fear, without second intentions, simply because I liked its flavor and could afford it. The trial had ended 3 weeks ago. Paula was sentenced to 12 years in prison for attempted poisoning with aggravating financial fraud and criminal conspiracy. Grant, as the main accomplice and for being older, was sentenced to 8 years. Anthony's testimonies, the forensic evidence, and the recordings I had collected during the cruise had built such a solid case that their lawyers recommended that they plead guilty in order to avoid even more severe sentences. During the legal process, I discovered the true magnitude of their plan. They had been coordinating with a network of fraudsters specialized in older people, a criminal organization that focused specifically on victims with modest but liquidable assets. My apartment, my savings, even my small pension had been evaluated and listed as merchandise in a catalog. The seized documents of their accomplices revealed that they had spent more than $15,000 in preparation for this trip of reconciliation, including bribes to cruise workers who had to facilitate their access to my cabin if the initial plan failed. They had also bought additional life insurance policies in my name, documents that I had never seen or signed, but that had my signature falsified with professional precision. It was a business for them, Detective Carol Vance, the investigator specializing in crimes against older people who had led the case, had explained to me. Your assets represented a guaranteed return investment. They had calculated everything. Operating costs, projected earnings, even asset liquidation schedules, the mathematical coldness with which they had planned my death, had impacted me more than emotional betrayal. It was not passion or despair that had motivated them. It was pure, calculated greed. The complete commodification of a woman who had dedicated decades of her life to unconditionally supporting them. But that revelation had also freed me from any residual guilt. Weeks after the arrest, I had struggled with thoughts of what could have been different or how I had not seen the signs before. Knowing that I had been a victim of professional criminals, not of relatives who had simply made bad decisions, allowed me to process the betrayal without assuming responsibility for it. The house where I lived had now been bought with money that I recovered from accounts that Paula had opened using my stolen information. During the investigation, the authorities discovered that they had been diverting small amounts of my pension for almost 3 years, transfers so small that I had never noticed them, but that the accumulated amounts represented a considerable sum. It was a modest but beautiful property, with a garden where I had begun to grow roses and aromatic herbs. It had 2 rooms, one for me and another that I had converted into a studio where I wrote. I had discovered, at age 74, that I had a talent for writing. My memories of the cruise had become a book that a small publisher had agreed to publish, a narrative that they hoped would help other older people to recognize and prevent similar situations. The writing process had been therapeutic in ways that I had not anticipated. Each chapter allowed me to process a different layer of trauma, transforming painful experiences into useful lessons for others. The letters I received from readers, especially from women who had recognized family patterns in my story, confirmed to me that my experience had not been in vain. Anthony had kept in touch with me from the cruise. He had left his work on the ship to study social work, inspired by what he had witnessed. Seeing what happened to you made me understand that I want to dedicate my life to protecting vulnerable people, he had told me during one of our weekly phone calls. I want to be the voice that whispers warnings before it is too late. I had also developed unexpected friendships with other survivors of family abuse. Detective Vance had connected me to a support group where we shared experiences and recovery strategies. It was comforting to discover that I was not alone, that the abuse of older people by family members was more common than what society publicly admitted. One of the women in the group, Martha, had been the victim of a similar scheme perpetrated by her son and daughter-in-law. "The most difficult thing," she had told me during one of our meetings, "is not losing the money or even discovering the betrayal. It is rebuilding your ability to trust your own judgment." She was right. For months after the cruise, I had questioned every decision, every intuition, every assessment of other people's intentions. How could I have been so blind for so long? What other signs had I ignored? How could I be sure that I would not be a victim again? But gradually, with the help of therapy and the support of the group, I had regained confidence in my instincts. More importantly, I had learned to value my own company. The years of loneliness that Paula had threatened as punishment had become a freedom that I had never experienced before. For the first time in decades, my decisions were completely mine. I could eat what I wanted, travel when I felt like it, spend my money on whims that I did not have to justify to anyone. I had taken painting classes. I had joined a reading club. I had even adopted an orange cat named Valentine that purred in my lap while I was writing. Economic independence had also given me perspective on how much money I had wasted trying to buy love. The calculations were devastating. In 5 years, I had transferred more than $30,000 to Grant for his supposed entrepreneurial projects. I had paid for family vacations, expensive gifts, even the down payment on Paula's apartment when she first moved out. All that money had been an investment in a relationship that had never been real. I had been buying time with people who saw me as a financial resource, not as a dear mother or grandmother. Now that same money allowed me to live comfortably, travel when I wanted, and contribute to causes that really mattered to me. I had established a small foundation that provided free legal assistance to older people who were victims of family abuse. It was a way to turn my painful experience into something constructive. The foundation also financed educational programs in community centers, teaching older people to recognize signs of financial and emotional manipulation. Knowledge is the best defense. It was the motto we had adopted, words that would have changed my life if I had known them 5 years earlier. The last contact I had with Paula was a letter she sent me from prison 6 weeks after her sentence. It did not contain apologies or recognition of responsibility. Instead, it was a list of complaints about prison conditions and money requests for her commissary account. Even from prison, she continued to see me as a source of financial resources. I had thrown the letter away without answering, not out of cruelty, but out of self-preservation. I had learned that some relationships cannot be fixed, and that trying to maintain toxic ties only perpetuates the damage. Grant had never tried to contact me. His silence was probably the most honest gift he had given me in years. The sunset from my terrace painted the sky in golden and purple tones that reminded me of the sunsets I had admired from the cruise ship before I learned the truth about my companions. But now, I could enjoy the beauty without the shadow of betrayal, without the anxiety of pleasing people who had never valued me. Valentine jumped onto my lap, interrupting my reflections with demanding purrs for attention. I stroked him as I finished my wine, thinking about how different my life was now compared to just 1 year ago. The loneliness I had feared for so long had revealed itself as a form of peace I had never known. The freedom I had gained by losing my false family was more valuable than any relationship based on lies and manipulation. Were there difficult days? Of course. Moments where I missed the illusion of family love, where nostalgia made me question whether I had made the right decisions. But those moments of doubt quickly faded when I remembered the glass of poisoned champagne, the coldness in Paula's eyes when she was arrested, the legal documents designed to steal my assets. The truth was that I had traded a family that hated me for a life that belonged completely to me, and that had been the best deal of my existence. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, I got up to prepare dinner. Just for me? Exactly the way I liked it, without having to consider anyone else's tastes or demands. It was a simple but profound luxury that I would never take for granted again. Tomorrow I would meet with other survivors from the support group. Next month, I would travel to Dallas to give a conference on elder abuse prevention. The following month, my book would be officially released. I had plans, dreams, goals that were completely mine. At age 74, I had learned that it is never too late to start a new life, an authentic life, a life where self-love matters more than the love of others bought with sacrifices. The question I ask myself now, after everything I lived, is simple. Have you ever lived through something similar? Or do you know someone who has gone through a similar situation? I ask you to share your experience in the comments, and if this story touched your heart, if you recognize something familiar in my words, please like and subscribe to the channel. These stories need to be told. They need to reach those who need to hear them most, because we all deserve true love, genuine respect, and the freedom to live without fear. And yeah, some